So ley lines are just like energy flow lines. If you think about acupuncture, we think about the meridians and the energy flow throughout our body. The earth has the exact same meridians, so to speak, but we call them ley lines. So they're just energy channels. And just like in the human body, they can get blocked. So you go along for acupuncture or, realignment with kinesiology, and it brings this flow back again. So we can do the same with the ley lines in the earth. And I'll talk about how we do that shortly. The same with water. Yes, we've all heard about underground water, but most people don't realize that it can create a challenge. What we're talking about with all of these energies, I think about them as stress. So if your bed is situated over a crossing underground running water stream and a negative ley line, for example, they're very low vibrational energies. And so they will act like a stress on your body and pull your energy down while you're sleeping.
G'day, Dr. Tony here with another great episode of Realms of Power. And today I've got Hayley Wallace joining us. Hayley, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tony. Great to be here.
Yeah, so in Realms of Power, I've divided it up into 12 different realms of, say, physical power, emotional power, financial power. And one of the realms is environment. I think environment is so important, and whether that's our home space, our global, our community environment, and it's certainly one of your specialties of the paths you've gone in to support people. So how about for the listeners, you just dive straight in and introduce what it is that you actually do and support people with now in turning their power on, especially around their home environment.
Right, yeah, thanks, Tony. So I guess there's probably not a lot of people aware of what we call land healing. It's gaining popularity. People are starting to understand it more and more. But even 10 years ago, you talk about land healing and people would glaze over because they didn't know what that meant. But just think of it in terms of the similar to the human body is that we have aspects of energy flow, like meridians and all of these kind of things. And the earth has the same sort of story. So it can have trauma, it can have attachments, it can have blocked flow, all of that kind of thing. So the concept of healing the land is to basically bring balance back, create low energy and make it higher. Clear energies that don't belong on the land anymore from that have occurred, for example. And so it's just like the human body, bringing it back into balance so that it's in the right sort of energy, space. And and then kind of just being yourself in your own energy. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. It's a beautiful summary. And again, a lot of people might not still be clear on what that actually means if you're doing a session. So we'll dive into that a little bit later. But how did you find for you, Hayley, yourself, with your story and your background, that you even made that connection and that path? Like, what was your journey to find and discover that that was an area that you wanted to focus on and help people and the land itself?
Yeah, I think maybe this found me actually, because I, for a long time, was a naturopath in clinic with, acupuncture, kinesiology, hypnotherapy, all of that kind of thing. So I was seeing a lot of patients who were coming with health challenges and whatnot. And what I found was over time, I had a number of clients who I talked to them about what else they were doing apart from the work they were doing with me, because their results were just off the charts. They were getting well really quickly. And so you always want to know, is it what we're doing or is there something else as well? And a fair few people over the time said to me, oh, I had this earth healing or a land healing done at my property. And they said, do you think that might have made a difference? And at the time I was like, I don't know, what's an earth thing? I've never heard of this. It's even sounds a bit weird. And so at the time I was just like, oh, I'm not sure, and move on. But when you hear that from enough people, it makes you start to go, hang on a minute. If all these people who are getting well have got the same sort of background story, I think we need to look into this and find out what this is all about. And so I did. I eventually found a lady by the name of Maggie Landman who became my teacher. And I got her to come out to my property at the time and find the ley lines, find the underground water, find the old earthquake lines, etc., and do some healing work. And we found that it made a difference in the sense that things that were kind of roadblocks to us, things that we were having challenges with, seemed to just, over a bit of time, resolve themselves. And so we thought, maybe this is related to doing this earth healing. So fast forward about a year, and we actually moved to another property. And again, same sort of thing, nothing really dramatic, but some things that just were hitting roadblocks. And so we contacted this lady again. At the time, she was no longer coming out to properties. She was working just remotely using maps and things. And at first I was like, oh, is that going to work as well? But anyway, she did the process, and yeah, we got the same sort of outcome. Things were back in flow again. And I thought, yeah, I need to go and learn this. I need to go and figure out what this is all about.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mm.
that started my journey.
That's a beautiful story. Like the lived experience, I feel, is always the way. And as you know, I'm a chiropractor, been for many years, and I am super passionate about, what's the underlying cause? And our environment does affect us, and we often just, a lot of people just wouldn't even be open to thinking that that's a possibility. But there's so much out there that we don't still fully understand. Well, not everyone understands everything, of course. And so, yeah, I'm
Mm.
starting to more and more ask those questions, especially the ones that come in and the same old stuff just keeps showing up. And you're like, okay, I'm still helping them with my, whether it's chiropractic or naturopathy, if you're doing that, or whatever it might be. But yeah, is there some other blockage, some other thing that they haven't even looked at? So I think and we're talking about realms of power, it's great to really expand your view and look at, okay, what else is there that could be possible? So let's dive into the land healing itself. And you mentioned some things before. You talked about ley lines and underground water. Most people have heard of underground water, of course. Some people aren't so sure about ley lines. So maybe could you just expand on that for the listeners who might not have any awareness of what you're talking about, what those things
Yep.
actually are that could be affecting, say, their property?
Okay, sure. So essentially, we're looking at energies that are either high vibrational or low vibrational. Now, these are naturally occurring. It's just like us. We have emotions like happiness. We also have emotions like sadness. They're normal. We live in a 3D space, and so it has that duality: good, bad, happy, sad, etc. And so the earth is part of that story. So ley lines are just like energy flow lines. If you think about acupuncture, we think about the meridians and the energy flow throughout our body. The earth has the exact same meridians, so to speak, but we call them ley lines. So they're just energy channels. And just like in the human body, they can get blocked. So you go along for acupuncture or, realignment with kinesiology, and it brings this flow back again. So we can do the same with the ley lines in the earth. And I'll talk about how we do that shortly. The same with water. Yes, we've all heard about underground water, but most people don't realize that it can create a challenge. What we're talking about with all of these energies, I think about them as stress. So if your bed is situated over a crossing underground running water stream and a negative ley line, for example, they're very low vibrational energies. And so they will act like a stress on your body and pull your energy down while you're sleeping. Now, considering we spend about 8 hours a night there, that's a pretty big impact that it's having. So even if you're eating well, having chiropractic, avoiding chemicals, doing all the things, you've still got 8 hours of stress on your body that you didn't even realize.
Mm.
So to me, that was a bit of a missing link as to why some people aren't getting well, even though they're doing everything right. Earthquake lines, you can imagine, they occur all over the world. Even though we don't have a lot of earthquakes in Australia now, we did once upon a time. And so that land can be still very unsettled. Areas where lots of trees have been removed, the big old trees that have been cut down, the grandmother trees, they leave almost like a wound on the earth in that area because energetically you've taken out something so powerful and high vibrational. So, that leaves a bit of a mark behind. We can also look at EMF, for example. I mean, that's kind of everywhere these days, but it comes from certain areas stronger than others. So that's something else we balance. But I also look at the positive ley lines because when you've got positive ley lines on your property, very high vibrational, we can work with those to boost them up even more and make the property in better flow. Yeah. Now
Mm.
I do this with crystals. When you work out what this energy is and you work out the corresponding or matching crystal and put that in place, it recalibrates that energy. And effectively, the crystals kind of anchor that change in place. So, yeah, that's how I do that is not just sort of clear energies out energetically, but physically use the crystalline energy as well to recalibrate.
That's amazing summary. Again, for a lot of people who might not be aware of this, just hopefully your mind has just expanded to the possibilities that this is, and you've seen the evidence, one for yourself and for a lot of clients that are already going positive. And again, I'm sure you would have cases of other people. I just want to tack one on though, because you did mention EMF, and for some people, they sort of bring that electromagnetic energy in a whole wide varying. So could that include even things like power lines, underground power lines, even water supply to the house, like artificial that we've introduced as humans, not just underground water? Would that, and sewage, would that all have an effect as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we have what we call two forms of geopathic stress. One is naturally occurring, like the earthquake energy and the missing trees, and the other is man-made. So all forms of EMF, all the ones you've just mentioned, plus phone towers in the distance, big power lines. We even introduce EMF into our own home in the form of kettles, toasters, mobile phones, all of those sort of things as well. So yeah, some people are very sensitive and so need to be recalibrated and balanced as best we can as well.
Mm. What about from even a more sort of global perspective about the environment, as in like maybe pollution in the environment, even the energies of the sun and the moon? Like, surely those would also be interacting with the land on a much larger scale. How important is that, and even say the slope of the land and those types of things?
Mm-hmm. The slope of the land, I don't find matters too much because it's a bit like our skin. You know what I mean? It has its kind of lumps and bumps and it's part of nature. So not so much the slope, but yeah, look, the interaction of the moon energies, the sun energies, and everything. That's part of what we're working with, but I don't directly go, okay, where's the moon at today? What's, those kind of things. It's really a case of once you've tuned your body in to become sensitive enough to pick up these energies, because I don't use dowsing rods or anything. So even when I'm teaching these classes, it's teaching my students how to find it with your body. So once you can pick that up, then we're working with what's going on the land here in relation to this person. So if we were working on your home property, Tony, then it's you and your family, whoever lives with you. What's your interrelationship with the earth, and therefore what needs healing in the highest good of all of you, plus the earth itself. And that will take into account those other aspects you mentioned as well. So
That's
sometimes when I map a property, people say, oh, I thought there'd be more ley lines or something. And there can be, but are they needing work? Are they out of balance? Do we need to work with them? Yes or no? Yeah.
Okay. And I'd love you to speak into Hayley as well. You mentioned before about you use the crystals, and a lot of people would go, "Oh, that's a bit out there. That's a bit woo-woo." But crystals have such an energy, and you would be much more attuned to different types of crystals, how they can interact with the land. How would you sort of fathom bringing crystal energy in as one of the healing steps in this process?
Yeah. I think the first thing we've got to recognize is that the crystals come out of the earth. They're part of nature. So even though they have been shoved into this category of woo-woo and out there, they're actually just minerals that we find in the earth. So they're just as natural as a tree. Uh, and it's really just a case of the earth provides. She provides medicines. Even when we look at something like aspirin that comes from the willow bark plant, nature provides. So when we use the crystals, essentially we're taking them from the earth and we're placing them in a different spot to just change that frequency. Now, once upon a time, we had no idea what crystals could do, and most of that was relegated to witchcraft. Fortunately, science has caught up and it has ways of measuring these things now. So I watched an amazing little 5-minute video clip of some the people who they had equipment that could measure the frequencies in crystals. And they took a clear quartz crystal only about this size. It was a point, and it had 786,000 hertz that was measurable. That's incredible considering the Earth itself is only around about 7.83 hertz. So, it's not just crazy witchcraft stuff. Like, we can use science to measure these things these days and see, oh, this is why this works. But that crystal compared to, let's say, a rose quartz or a red jasper, they all have slightly different frequencies and energies. So when you tune in and work out which ones need to go where, that's kind of where the magic lies.
Well, it really makes sense. And look, definitely from your naturopath training and background, you would have seen how, a lot of the supplements or things, treatments, if you like, that you would have helped support people with have come from the earth, and they have different healing properties for different things. That's part of the whole study of that whole realm. So you've already got that training and framework, and you've just integrated across to the earth itself. I think that's a great background to sort of bring in. Have you found that there's been correlations between the naturopathy and the land healing?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, it doesn't always come up every time you work on a property, but I find it interesting. So, for example, when people are living over earthquake energy or they're living in high EMF areas, there can be a similar outcome in the sense that those two energies can actually cause the polarity, the cellular polarity spin, to go backwards. So just like it does when we put food in a microwave, it causes that spin to go backwards in that frequency. So this can be linked with things like anxiety, schizophrenia. It can even be linked excuse me, with cancers and those kind of things. So I have seen correlations with that quite a number of times. And so we're not necessarily saying that causes that. There's many things that can cause cancers or other illnesses, but you add a stress to the body and you're just going to amplify whatever's going wrong or out of balance. So yes, I do find it interesting, but you don't kind of get into that blending a naturopathic consultation with land healing, for example. You'd be there for a month of Sundays working with the whole family, I think.
I get it. Yeah,
So
sure.
I always say to people, look, there's heaps of great practitioners to go and talk about food and chemicals and all, utilize those people and then take care of the land as well. And now you've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, what a great concept. Just in my mind as well, I've heard, and I'm sure other people have as well, some of the very large ancient buildings, cathedrals, pyramids and structures have been purposely placed on high energy ley line or areas around the world. What's the link there with land healing or their specific positioning of certain buildings and structures?
Yeah. So this information is nothing new. It's been around for a long time. And so when we look back at old texts and things, they talked about ley lines, and to them it was just normal. It's us in the modern world who go, oh, no, that's crazy, strange witchcraft stuff. And it's like, I think it's designed for us to think that way, whereas it's all perfectly normal, natural energies. Now, back then, because they did see it as normal, they did work with it frequently. They tended to build mostly on areas where positive ley lines were crossing. The Giza pyramids, for example, are on 5 major crossing positive ley line points. So that harnesses, you can tap in and harness this amazing energy that the earth provides. The old cathedrals, as you mentioned, throughout Europe, they were on crossing positive ley line points as well. They knew that when you are over those areas and people come in to pray or whatnot, they're sitting over that area. It's naturally high vibrational and it puts them into that energetic state. But conversely, if you built over negative ley lines or negative crossing lines accidentally, then it will actually bring your energy down. It will do quite the opposite. So I know in China and I think Finland, Poland, they actually do take this sort of stuff into account before they do any building. Here in
Mm.
Australia, we just tend to relegate it to the realms of, crazy, unfortunately, because it really does impact people. So, mm,
Well, it sounds super important for people to, again, in that environmental realm, if you take on what Hayley is sharing here today, and we're looking at realms of power, anything you can do. And if you have built on an area that's not working and you're like wondering why you're always drained and you've tried all the things, maybe it's something like giving Hayley a call or someone, as you say, Hayley, you do it remotely, and I'll get to that in a sec. But maybe just open your mind to the possibility that, as you say, from this has been around from ancient times. And I love when you use the word tap, when we're tapping into our power, when we're tapping into that frequency, resonance, coherence, raising your vibration. Really, that's a beautiful space to be coming from, I feel. So,
mm.
Hayley, let's talk about a bit more practical, if you don't mind. And I know you teach this now as well. You've been doing this for a long time. How would you be able to tap in to those energies that you've talked about? How does that actually happen?
Yep. So I think most people are aware of something like dowsing rods, that people use these sticks or copper rods, these sort of things. And when they get to a certain area, the energy changes and these rods move. We don't really need to use external tools. They're fun and it gives people confirmation, but in reality, we can just pick that energy up with our body. So, for example, when I used to work on site a lot of the time, I would go to someone's property and I'd have a look around and be like, okay, here's a ley line, or here's, an energy I've found. And I'd say to the owner of the property, come and stand here and tell me what you feel. And they would stand there and they'd feel it and they'd go, oh, actually, I feel like really heavy, or this makes me feel anxious, or that, something, or I'm getting a headache or something. And I'd say, yeah, you're standing over a negative ley line or an earthquake line or something like this. And then I would find another line that was positive, but I didn't tell them what it was. And I'd say, come and stand here and tell me what you feel. And they'd stand there and they'd start going, oh, I don't think I'm getting this, because actually this feels really nice. And I'd say, yeah, that's because it's a positive ley line. And so it was really beautiful confirmation that the majority, I'm going to say 85, 90% of people who walked with me actually got it right. Once they were standing there, connecting in, feeling what it felt like for themselves, because we can all do that. We just have never been taught that before. So, yeah, so these days, like I say, I work remotely, meaning I don't actually go and walk the property and physically place the crystals in the ground, simply because I'm so busy and I just don't have the time and I can't drive all over the countryside all day. A lot of my work is overseas as well. So I work in Spain, France, America, New Zealand, everywhere. Um, so these days, what I do is I bring up a Google Earth map, or sometimes people email me a map of their property. And then instead of standing and feeling into the lines, I've always been very clairvoyant, so I can see the lines as well. So many people do this differently. You can feel it, you can sense it, and etc. And so I just draw it all in for them, and then I mark where the crystals need to go, and I send them the map with the crystals, etc. And they go and pop them in place themselves. Now, here's a stretch, Tony, for some people is, if you actually can't, let's say you lived in an apartment building and you couldn't put the crystals in the ground, you can actually stick the crystals on the map.
Mm.
Now, it sounds a bit crazy, but energy, as we now know from scientific studies, energy is not a local thing. We've got the observer effect and, many different things that have kind of proven that point over and over again. So actually, even working on the map, and all of my property developers only work on maps. They can't go and put the crystals in the ground because they're about to dig the whole thing up. So they put the crystals on the map, and now the building process, the development, it all goes smoothly. So yeah, it's, everything is energy. Everything is the table in front of me. It's energy. Science has proven that. Yeah. So all we're doing is changing the energy flow.
Mm. The quantum realm is so amazing, and for people that want to explore and open their senses, because I think in our senses we've been limited, and as you say, most people just aren't tapped in or tuned in to be able to feel that, or if I can use the word perceive. by
Yep.
perceiving what that energy feels like, whether it's through the quantum realm, through the map, through the physical lived experience, I think is really expanding our senses and stepping into our true power. There's so much more we're capable of. And through this conversation, hopefully some people have just expanded even 5% to the possibility. So, Hayley, I'd love you to share a story, if one comes to mind, of someone you might have recently helped, in a either commercial setting or in a private setting, and just a story of what actually one case would look like.
Sure. So I do have, quite a number of stories, and I have written a book actually with lots of these stories in there, because I do work for people with businesses as well as people's homes. I guess one I want to share with you it illustrates two things that happened on a property. I had a friend, she called me up to a property up in the mountains, and it was on the hinterland of the Sunshine Coast, and she said, I don't know what's going on here, but nothing's really working for us. She said, we're really, really financially strapped. And she said, and my daughter will not go in the bathroom at night by herself. She's really afraid. And she keeps talking about the man. And so anyway, I said, okay, not a problem. I said, just, leave it with me. So I went around this 5-acre property and I found, lots of different things, but the significant thing was two underground water streams which were joining and running off the property. And when I found this underground water, I knew that it was connected to their money. It was like draining it away. And I could just see all of this play out in my mind. So I just worked on that, put the crystals in place. We kept on going around and working on the rest of the property. Then I got to the house and I went in and she said to me, I'll just leave you with it. And I just walked around and stood in each room. And like I said, I've always been able to see the other stuff ever since I was a little kid. I went through and found some energies and cleared them, etc. And I went into the bathroom and I could see very clearly this image of this indigenous man. He was obviously, I don't know what the wording is, but let's say, someone highly regarded, an elder in his mob, etc. And so he was literally just kind of sitting there in the corner. And so I just opened a conversation with him and said to him, basically why you're here, etc. And, the feedback I kind of got from him was that this was his land and his people had been there for a long time and he was still there looking after the land. And, it's like family to them and all of these kind of things. And so I said, yeah, I understand this, and I said, but it's quite disruptive for this family here. And the little girl's afraid and, just kind of explained the situation. And I also explained how much the family loved this land and they really looked after it. They were growing their food, they were very respectful of the land. And, after we kind of had this exchange, his energy actually just started to sort of dissipate.
Mm.
And I realized that he's actually opted to move his energy on, which I believe is in his highest good too, because in a sense, he's still kind of earthbound. And so I just saw this energy move and we didn't say anything to the daughter at all. She was, playing and whatnot. And anyway, I said to the mum, don't say anything about what we've done. Just wait and see what happens. And she messaged me the next morning. She was so excited. And she said she just walked in there. She just used the bathroom. She just didn't say anything. And they've never had a problem since. Now, the interesting thing about that is I connected with them 9 months later. They'd actually ended up moving to somewhere else, but they had a new work truck. They had a new 4-wheel drive. Like life had completely changed financially. And, he said to me, ever since you fixed that water, he said, everything has, been really, really good. Now, I can't guarantee that's going to happen on every property, but I've seen it happen many times. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it depends. There's many things that can affect us financially, but in their situation, those earth energies were a really big part of that. So, yeah, I mean, I love watching the outcomes. Like that's life-changing for the whole family for them. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That story gives me goosebumps, and for some people it will, and some people will still maybe have their beliefs on it, and that's fine as well. But everyone is living in this world, on this realm, and we are physical beings. We've got these 3D bodies, and sure that there's other expansive things that we can do, But wow, just listening to you and hearing that story today, I think is inspirational. So, Hayley, it's amazing that you've gone down that road and helped, so many people, because you've been doing this for quite some time. How would someone look you up or find you if they were listen to this episode and went, wow, I've got to get in touch with Hayley, especially if she can work remotely? How do they find out?
Yeah, so the best way is through my website. So it's the W's and Hayley Wallace, my name, which is right behind me here, .com. And yeah, there's all information about whether you want to have a land healing done or whether you want to come and learn about land healing. I run women's retreats, intuitive development courses. I've got my books on the website. There's lots of different things on there. So yeah, happy for people to reach out and chat to me and see how I can help them best.
Oh, look, that's amazing. And look, have you got any final wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners that have tuned into the realms of power, that are maybe looking at expanding their minds and turning their power on? What final wisdom would you like to share for them today?
I think in terms of land, because I find when people do feel the energies for themselves, they really get a sense of, holy moly, this is bigger than I ever expected. So what I love to share with people to do is actually to just walk very slowly around your own space, your own yard, or go down to the local park or something, and just let yourself feel what it feels like over here compared to over there, because we are more connected than we realize. I've watched this prove itself to me time and time again. And even when I map someone's property and I say, you've got a negative ley line over here, they say, oh, you know what? We've never really liked that part of the yard, or we never sit in that area. And when I say you've got a positive ley line over here, they say, oh, that's the favorite part of the property for us. And it's like, yeah, see, you knew this. You didn't know, like, you didn't know that you knew this. So I think that's a good starting point for people, is to have a think about what parts of your land you already like and are already drawn to versus the ones that you don't spend much time in, and go and hang out there for a bit and see if you can feel it and get connected. It'll prove itself to you straight away. Yeah.
What a beautiful practical thing to do as well. And just really connecting with our land as a whole, I think is so important. So Hayley, I just really want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your beautiful perception, your wisdom for our listeners, and just keep doing what you're doing, because more people out there healing in all the different realms, I think, is great for our whole realm. So our listeners, again, for tuning in, really appreciate your time and energy to tune into these episodes. Hope you have an awesome day. See ya.